I knew, the sorcerer said. I knew you'd come. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be frank with you. You anticipated my plans. Ball lightning? The Witcher asked, smiling wanly. Istreth frowned. Perhaps, he said. Perhaps there'll be ball lightning, but definitely not shot from around the corner. Honourably, face to face, you're a Witcher, that evens things out. Very well, decide when and where. Geralt pondered and decided. That little square, he pointed. I passed through it, I know. There's a well there called the Green Key. By the well, then. Yes, indeed. By the well. Tomorrow, 2 hours after sunup. Very well. I shall be on time. They stood still for a moment, not looking at each other. The sorcerer finally muttered something to himself, kicked a lump of clay and crushed it under his heel. Geralt? What? Do you feel foolish, by any chance? Yes, I do, the Witcher reluctantly admitted. That's a relief, Istreth muttered, because I feel like an utter dolt. I never expected I'd ever have to fight a Witcher to the death over a woman. I know how you feel, Istreth. Well, the sorcerer smiled affectedly. The fact that it's come to this, that I've decided to do something so utterly against my nature, proves that it has to be done. I know, Istreth. Needless to say, you know that whichever of us survives will have to flee at once and hide from Yenna at the end of the world. I do. And needless to say, you count on being able to go back to her when she simmers down. Of course. It's all settled then, the sorcerer said, and made to turn away, but after a moment's hesitation, held out his hand to him. Till tomorrow, Geralt. Till tomorrow, the Witcher said, shaking his hand. Till tomorrow, Istreth. Chapter 7. Hey, Witcher! Geralt looked up from the table, on which he had been absent-mindedly sketching fanciful squiggles in the spilled beer. It was hard to find you, Mayor Herbolth said, sitting down and moving aside the jugs and beer mugs. They said in the inn that you'd moved out to the stables, but I found only a horse and some bundles of clothes there. And you're here. This is probably the most disreputable inn in the entire town. Only the worst scum comes here. What are you doing? Drinking. I can see that. I wanted to converse with you. Are you sober? As a child. I'm pleased. What is it you want, Herbolth? As you can see, I'm busy. Geralt smiled at the wench who was putting another jug on the table. There's a rumour doing the rounds, the mayor said, frowning, that you and our sorcerer plan to kill each other. That's our business. His and mine. Don't interfere. No, it isn't your business, Herbolth countered. We need Istreth. We can't afford another sorcerer. Go to the temple and pray for his victory, then. Don't scoff, the mayor snapped, and don't be a smart-ass, you vagrant. By the gods, if I didn't know that the sorcerer would never forgive me, I would have thrown you into the dungeons, right at the very bottom, or dragged you beyond the town behind 2 horses, or ordered Cicada to stick you like a pig. But alas, Istreth has a thing about honour and wouldn't have excused me it. I know you wouldn't forgive me either. It's turned out marvellously, the Witcher said, draining another mug and spitting out a straw which had fallen into it. I'm a lucky fellow, aren't I? Is that all? No, Herbolth said, taking a full purse out from under his coat. Here is 100 marks, Witcher. Take it and get out of Aelgine Vale. Get out of here, at once if possible, but in any case before sunrise. I told you we can't afford another sorcerer, and I won't let ours risk his neck in a duel with someone like you for a stupid reason, because of some... He broke off without finishing, although the Witcher did not even flinch. Take your hideous face away, Herbolth, Geralt said, and stick your 100 marks up your arse. Go away, because the sight of you makes me sick. A little longer, and I'll cover you in puke from your cap to your toes. The mayor put away the purse and put both hands on the table. If that's how you want it, he said. I tried to let you leave of your own free will, but it's up to you. Fight, cut each other up, burn each other, tear each other to pieces for that slut who spreads her legs for anyone who wants her. I think Eastredd will give you such a thrashing, you thug, that only your boots will be left, and if not, I'll catch you before his body cools off and break all your bones on the wheel. I won't leave a single part of you intact, you—" He did not manage to remove his hands from the table. The witch's movement was so swift. The arm which shot out from under the table was a blur in front of the mayor's eyes, and a dagger lodged with a thud between his fingers. "Perhaps," the witcher whispered, clenching his fist on the dagger's haft and staring into Herbolth's face, from which the blood had drained. "Perhaps Eastredd will kill me. But if not, then I'll leave, and don't try to stop me, you vile scum, if you don't want the streets of your filthy town to foam with blood. Now get out of here." "Mayor, what's going on here?" "Hey, you. Calm down, Cicada," Herbolth said, slowly withdrawing his hand, cautiously sliding it across the table as far as possible from the dagger's blade. "It's nothing, nothing." Cicada returned his half-drawn sword to its scabbard. Geralt did not look at him. He did not look at the mayor as he left the inn, shielded by Cicada from the staggering log drivers and carters. A small man with a ratty face and piercing black eyes sitting a few tables away was watching him. "I'm annoyed," he realized in amazement. "My hands are trembling. Really, my hands are trembling. It's astonishing what's happening to me. Could it mean that?" "Yes," he thought, looking at the little man with the ratty face. "I think so. I'll have to," he thought. "How cold it is." He got up. He smiled as he looked at the small man. Then he drew aside the front of his jacket, took 2 coins from the full purse, and threw them on the table. The coins clinked. One of them rolled across the table and struck the dagger's blade, still stuck into the polished wood. Chapter 8. The blow fell unexpectedly. The club swished softly in the darkness, so fast that the witcher only just managed to protect his head by instinctively raising an arm, and only just managed to cushion the blow by lithely twisting his body. He sprang aside, dropping on one knee, somersaulted, landed on his feet, felt a movement of the air yielding before another swing of the club, evaded the blow with a nimble pirouette, spinning between the 2 shapes closing in on him in the dark, and reached above his right shoulder for his sword. His sword was not there. Nothing can take these reactions from me, he thought, leaping smoothly aside. Routine, cellular memory. I'm a mutant. I react like a mutant, he thought, dropping to one knee again, dodging a blow and reaching into his boot for his dagger. There was no dagger. He smiled wryly and was hit on the head with a club. A light blazed in his eyes and the pain shot down to his fingertips. He fell, relaxing, still smiling. Somebody flopped onto him, pressing him against the ground. Somebody else ripped the purse from his belt. His eye caught sight of a knife flashing. The one kneeling on his chest tore open his jerkin at the neck, seized the chain and pulled out his medallion, and immediately let go of it. "By Baal Zebulth," Geralt heard somebody pant. "It's a witcher! A real bruiser!" The other swore, breathing heavily. "He didn't have a sword! Oh, gods, save us from the evil! Let's scalp Radgast! Don't touch him!" For a moment, the moon shone through a wispy cloud. Geralt saw, just above him, a gaunt, ratty face and small, black, shining eyes. He heard the other man's loud footsteps fading away, vanishing into an alleyway reeking of cats and burnt fat. The small man with the ratty face slowly removed his knee from Geralt's chest. "Next time," Geralt heard the clear whisper, "next time you feel like killing yourself, Witcher, don't drag other people into it. Just hang yourself in the stable from your reins." Chapter 9. It must have rained during the night. Geralt walked out in front of the stable, wiping his eyes, combing the straw from his hair with his fingers. The rising sun glistened on the wet roofs, gleamed gold in the puddles. The witcher spat. He still had a nasty taste in his mouth, and the lump on his head throbbed with a dull ache. A scrawny black cat sat on a rail in front of the stable, licking a paw intently. "Here, kitty, kitty," the witcher said. The cat stopped what it was doing and looked at him malevolently, flattened its ears and hissed, baring its little fangs. "I know," Geralt nodded. "I don't like you either. I'm only joking." He pulled tight the loosened buckles and clasps of his jerkin with unhurried movements, smoothed down the creases in his clothing, and made sure it did not hinder his freedom of movement at any point. He slung his sword across his back and adjusted the position of the hilt above his right shoulder. He tied a leather band around his forehead, pulling his hair back behind his ears. He pulled on long combat gloves, bristling with short, conical silver spikes. He glanced up at the sun once more, his pupils narrowing into vertical slits. A glorious day, he thought. A glorious day for a fight. He sighed, spat, and walked slowly down the narrow road, beside walls giving off the pungent, penetrating aroma of wet plaster and lime mortar. "Hey, freak!" He looked around. Cicada, flanked by 3 suspicious-looking armed individuals, sat on a heap of timbers piled up beside the embankment. He rose, stretched, and walked into the middle of the alley, carefully avoiding the puddles. "Where are you going?" he asked, placing his slender hands on his belt, weighed down with weapons. "None of your business. Just to be clear, I don't give a tinker's cuss about the mayor, the sorcerer, or this whole shitty town," Cicada said, slowly emphasizing the words. "This is about you, Witcher. You won't make it to the end of this alley. Hear me? I want to find out how good a fighter you are. The matter's tormenting me. Stop, I said. Get out of my way. Stop!" Cicada yelled, placing a hand on his sword hilt. "Didn't you hear what I said? We're going to fight. I'm challenging you. We'll soon see who's the better man." Geralt shrugged without slowing down. "I'm challenging you to fight. Do you hear me, mutant?" Cicada shouted, barring his way again. "What are you waiting for? Draw your weapon. What, got cold feet? Or perhaps you're nothing more than one of those other fools who's hunting that witch of yours, like Eastred." Geralt walked on, forcing Cicada to retreat, to walk clumsily backwards. The individuals with Cicada got up from the pile of timbers and followed them, although they hung back a little way off. Geralt heard the mud squelching beneath their boots. "I challenge you," Cicada repeated, blanching and flushing by turns. "Do you hear me, you witcher pox? What else do I have to do to you? Spit in your ugly face?" "Go ahead and spit." Cicada stopped, and indeed took a breath, pursing his lips to spit. He was watching the witcher's eyes, not his hands, and that was a mistake. Geralt, still not slowing down, struck him very fast without a backswing, just flexing from the knees, his fist encased in the spiked glove. He punched Cicada right in the mouth, straight in his twisted lips. They split, exploding like mashed cherries. The witcher crouched and struck once again in the same place, this time from a short backswing, feeling the fury spilling from him with the force and the momentum. Cicada, whirling around with one foot in the mud and the other in the air, spat blood and splashed onto his back into a puddle. The witcher, hearing behind him the hiss of a sword blade in the scabbard, stopped and turned sinuously around, his hand on his sword hilt. "Well," he said in a voice trembling with anger, "be my guests." The one who had drawn the sword looked him in the eyes, briefly. Then he averted his gaze. The others began to fall back, first slowly, then more and more quickly. Hearing it, the man with the sword also stepped back, noiselessly moving his lips. The furthest away of them turned and ran, splattering mud. The others froze to the spot, not attempting to come closer. Cicada turned over in the mud and dragged himself up on his elbows. He mumbled, hawked, and spat out something white amid a lot of red. As Geralt passed, he casually kicked him in the face, shattering his cheekbone and sending him splashing into the puddle again. He walked on without looking back. Eastred was already by the well and stood leaning against it, against the wooden cover, green with moss. He had a sword in his belt, a magnificent light Terganian sword with a half-basket hilt, the metal-fitted end of the scabbard resting against the shining leg of a riding boot. A black bird with ruffled feathers sat on the sorcerer's shoulder. It was a kestrel. "You're here, Witcher," Estreth said, proffering the kestrel a gloved hand, and gently and cautiously setting the bird down on the canopy of the well. "Yes, I am, Estreth. I hadn't expected you to come. I thought you'd leave town." "I didn't." The sorcerer laughed loudly and freely, throwing his head back. She wanted to save us," he said. "Both of us. Never mind, Geralt. Let's cross swords. Only one of us can remain." "Do you mean to fight with a sword?" "Does that surprise you? After all you do. Come on, have at you." "Why, Estreth? Why with swords and not with magic?" The sorcerer blanched, and his mouth twitched anxiously. "Have at you, I said," he shouted. "This is not the time for questions. That time has passed. Now is the time for deeds." "I want to know," Geralt said slowly. "I want to know why with swords. I want to know why you have a black kestrel and where it came from. I have the right to know. I have the right to know the truth, Estreth." "The truth?" the sorcerer repeated bitterly. "Yes, perhaps you have. Perhaps you have. Our rights are equal. The kestrel, you ask? It came at dawn, wet from the rain. It brought a letter. A very short one, I know it by heart. 'Farewell, Val, forgive me. There are gifts which one may not accept, and there is nothing in me I could repay you with. And that is the truth, Val. Truth is a shard of ice.' Well, Geralt? Are you satisfied? Have you availed yourself of your right?" The Witcher slowly nodded. "Good," Estreth said. "Now I shall avail myself of mine, because I don't acknowledge that letter. Without her I cannot... I prefer to... Have at you, damn it!" He crouched over and drew his sword with a swift, lithe movement, demonstrating his expertise. The kestrel cried. The Witcher stood motionless, his arms hanging at his sides. "What are you waiting for?" the sorcerer barked. Geralt slowly raised his head, looked at him for a moment, and then turned on his heel. "No, Estreth," he said quietly. "Farewell." "What do you bloody mean?" Geralt stopped. "Estreth," he said over his shoulder, "don't drag other people into your suicide. If you must, hang yourself in the stable from your reins." "Geralt!" the sorcerer screamed, and his voice suddenly cracked, jarring the ear with a false wrong note. "I'm not giving up. She won't run away from me. I'll follow her to Vengerberg. I'll follow her to the end of the world. I'll find her. I'll never give her up. Know that." "Farewell, Estreth." He walked off into the alley without turning back at all. He walked, paying no attention to the people quickly getting out of his way, or to the hurried slamming of doors and shutters. He did not notice anybody or anything. He was thinking about the letter waiting for him in the inn. He speeded up. He knew that a black kestrel, wet from the rain, holding a letter in its curved beak, was waiting for him on the bedhead. He wanted to read the letter as soon as possible, even though he knew what was in it. Eternal Flame. Chapter 1.
"You pig! You plague-stricken warbler, you trickster!"
Geralt, his interest piqued, led his mare around the corner of the alleyway. Before he located the source of the screams, a deep, stickily glassy clink joined them. A large jar of cherry preserve, thought the Witcher. A jar of cherry preserve makes that noise when you throw it at somebody from a great height or with great force. He remembered it well. When he lived with Yennefer, she would occasionally throw jars of preserve at him in anger. Jars she had received from clients. Yennefer had no idea how to make preserve. Her magic was fallible in that respect. A large group of onlookers had formed around the corner, outside a narrow, pink-painted cottage. A young, fair-haired woman in a nightdress was standing on a tiny balcony decorated with flowers just beneath the steep eaves of the roof. Bending a plump, fleshy arm visible beneath the frills of her nightdress, the woman hurled down a chipped flower pot. A slim man in a plum bonnet with a white feather jumped aside like a scalded cat, and the flower pot crashed onto the ground just in front of him, shattering into pieces.
Please, Vespula,
the man in the bonnet shouted.
Don't lend credence to the gossip. I was faithful to you. May I perish if it is not true. You bastard, you son of the devil, you wretch!
The plump blonde yelled and went back into the house, no doubt in search of further missiles. "Hey, Dandelion," called the Witcher, leading his resisting and snorting mare onto the battlefield. "How are you? What's going on?"
Nothing special,
said the troubadour, grinning.
the usual. Greetings, Geralt. What are you doing here? Oh, bloody hell, look out!
A tin cup whistled through the air and bounced off the cobbles with a clang. Dandelion picked it up, looked at it, and threw it in the gutter.
Take those rags!
The blonde woman screamed, the frills on her plump breasts swaying gracefully.
And get out of my sight! Don't set foot here again, you bastard!
These aren't mine, Dandelion said in astonishment, taking a pair of men's trousers with odd-coloured legs from the ground.
I've never had trousers like these in my life. Get out! I don't want to see you any more. You... Do you know what you're like in bed? Pathetic. Pathetic. Do you hear? Do you hear, everybody?
Another flower pot whistled down, a dried stalk that had grown out of it flapping. Dandelion barely managed to dodge. Following the flower pot, a copper cauldron of at least 2.5 gallons came spinning down. The crowd of onlookers standing a safe distance away from the cannonade reeled with laughter. The more active and unprincipled jokers among them applauded and incited the blonde to further action. "She doesn't have a crossbow in the house, does she?" the Witcher asked anxiously.
"It can't be ruled out,"
said the poet, lifting his head up towards the balcony.
"She has a load of junk in there. Did you see those trousers?"
"Perhaps we ought to get out of here. You can come back when she calms down."
"Hell no," Dandelion grimaced. "I shall never go back to a house from which calumny and copper pots are showered on me. I consider this fickle relationship over. Let's just wait till she throws my... Oh, mother, no! Vespula! My lute!"
He lunged forward, arms outstretched, stumbled, fell, and caught the instrument at the last moment, just above the cobbles. The lute spoke plaintively and melodiously.
"Phew!" sighed the bard, springing up. "I've got it. Oh, it's fine, Geralt. We can go now. Admittedly, my cloak with a marten collar is still there, but too bad. Let it be my grievance. Knowing her, she won't throw the cloak down." "You lying sloven!" the blonde screamed, and spat copiously from the balcony. "You vagrant! You croaking pheasant!"
"What's the matter with her? What have you been up to, Dandelion?"
"Oh, nothing unusual," the troubadour shrugged. "She demands monogamy, like they all do, and then throws another man's trousers at a fellow. Did you hear what she was screaming about me? By the gods! I also know some women who decline their favours more prettily than she gives hers, but I don't shout about it from the rooftops. Let's go."
"Where do you suggest we go?"
"Are you serious? The Temple of the Eternal Fire? Let's drop into the spear blade. I have to calm my nerves."
Without protest, the Witcher led his mare after Dandelion, who had headed off briskly into a narrow lane. The troubadour tightened the pegs of his lute as he strode, strummed the strings to test them, and played a deep, resounding chord.
"The air bears autumn's cool scent, our words seized by an icy gust. Your tears have my heart rent, but all is gone, and part we must." He broke off, waving cheerfully at 2 maids who were passing, carrying baskets of vegetables. The girls giggled. "What brings you to Novigrad, Geralt?"
"Fitting out. A harness, some tackle, and a new jacket."
The Witcher pulled down the creaking, fresh-smelling leather.
"How do you like it, Dandelion?"
"You don't keep up with the fashion," the bard grimaced, brushing a chicken feather from his gleaming, cornflower-blue caftan with puffed sleeves and a serrated collar. "Oh, I'm glad we've met. Here in Novigrad, the capital of the world, the centre and cradle of culture.
Here, a cultured man can live life to the full. Let's live it one lane further on, suggested Geralt, glancing at a tramp who had squatted down and was defecating, eyes bulging in an alleyway. Your constant sarcasm is becoming annoying, Dandelion said, grimacing again. Novigrad, I tell you, is the capital of the world. Almost 30,000 dwellers, Geralt, not counting travellers. Just imagine. Brick houses, cobbled main streets, a seaport, stores, shops, 4 watermills, slaughterhouses, sawmills, a large manufactory making beautiful slippers, and every conceivable guild and trade. A mint, 8 banks, and 19 pawnbrokers, a castle and guardhouse to take the breath away, and diversions. A scaffold, a gallows with a drop, 35 taverns, a theatre, a menagerie, a market, and a dozen whorehouses, and I can't remember how many temples, but plenty. Oh, and the women, Geralt, bathed, coiffured, and fragrant. Those satins, velvets, and silks, those whalebones and ribbons. Oh, Geralt, the rhymes pour out by themselves. Around your house now white from frost, sparkles ice on the pond and marsh. Your longing eyes grieve what is lost, but naught can change this parting harsh. A new ballad. Aye, I'll call it Winter, but it's not ready yet. I can't finish it. Vespula's made me completely jittery, and the rhymes won't come together. Ah, Geralt, I've got to ask, how is it with you and Yennefer? It isn't. I understand. No, you bloody don't. Is it far to this tavern? Just round the corner. Ah, here we are. Can you see the sign? Yes, I can. My sincere and humble greetings. Dandelion flashed a smile at the wench sweeping the steps. Has anyone ever told you, my lady, that you are gorgeous? The wench flushed and gripped her broom tightly. For a moment, Geralt thought she would whack the troubadour with the handle. He was mistaken. The wench smiled engagingly and fluttered her eyelashes. Dandelion, as usual, paid absolutely no attention. Greetings to one and all. Good day, he bellowed, entering the tavern and plucking the lute strings hard with his thumb. Master Dandelion, the most renowned poet in the land, has visited your tawdry establishment, landlord, for he has a will to drink beer. Do you mark the honour I do you, swindler? I do, said the innkeeper morosely, leaning forward over the bar. I'm content to see you, minstrel, sir. I see that your word is indeed your bond. After all, you promised to stop by first thing to pay for yesterday's exploits. And I, just imagine, presumed you were lying as usual. I swear I am ashamed. There is no need to feel shame, my good man, the troubadour said light-heartedly, for I have no money. We shall converse about that later. No, the innkeeper said coldly. We should converse about it right away. Your credit has finished, my lord poet. No one befools me twice in a row. Dandelion hung up his lute on a hook protruding from the wall, sat down at a table, took off his bonnet, and pensively stroked the egret's feather pinned to it. Do you have any funds, Geralt? He asked with hope in his voice. No, I don't. Everything I had went on the jacket. That is ill. That is ill, Dandelion sighed. There's not a bloody soul to stand around. Innkeeper, why is it so empty here today? It's too early for ordinary drinkers, and the journeyman masons who are repairing the temple have already been and returned to the scaffolding, taking their master with them. And there's no one? No one at all? No one aside from the Honourable Merchant Biebervelt, who is breaking his fast in the large snug. Dainty's here, Dandelion said, pleased. You should have said at once. Come to the snug, Geralt. Do you know the halfling, Dainty Biebervelt? No. Never mind, you can make his acquaintance. Ah, the troubadour called, heading towards the snug. I smell from the east a whiff and hint of onion soup, pleasing to my nostrils. Peekaboo! It's us! Surprise! A chubby-cheeked, curly-haired halfling in a pistachio-green waistcoat was sitting at the table in the centre of the chamber, beside a post decorated with garlands of garlic and bunches of herbs. In his left hand he held a wooden spoon, and in his right an earthenware bowl. At the sight of Dandelion and Geralt, the halfling froze and opened his mouth, and his large nut-brown eyes widened in fear. "What cheer, Dainty?" Dandelion said, blithely waving his bonnet. The halfling did not move or close his mouth. His hand, Geralt noticed, was trembling a little, and the long strips of boiled onion hanging from the spoon were swinging like a pendulum. "Greetings, greetings, the Dandelion," he stammered, and swallowed loudly. "Do you have the hiccups? Would you like me to frighten you? Look out, your wife's been seen on the turnpike. She'll be here soon, Gardenia Beavervelt in person." "You really are an ass, Dandelion," the halfling said reproachfully. Dandelion laughed brightly again, simultaneously playing 2 complicated chords on his lute. "Well, you have an exceptionally stupid expression on your face, and you're goggling at us as though we had horns and tails. Perhaps you're afraid of the Witcher. What? Perhaps you think halfling season has begun. Perhaps—" "Stop it!" Geralt snapped, unable to stay quiet, and walked over to the table. "Forgive us, friend. Dandelion has experienced a serious personal tragedy, and he still hasn't got over it. He's trying to mask his sorrow, dejection, and disgrace by being witty." "Don't tell me," the halfling said, finally slurping up the contents of the spoon. "Let me guess. Vespula has finally thrown you out on your ear. What, Dandelion?" "I don't engage in conversations or sensitive subjects with individuals who drink and gorge themselves while their friends stand," the troubadour said, and then sat down without waiting. The halfling scooped up a spoon of soup and licked off the threads of cheese hanging from it. "Right you are," he said glumly. "So, be my guests. Sit you down and help yourselves. Would you like some onion pottage?" "In principle, I don't dine at such an early hour," Dandelion said, putting on airs. "But very well, just not on an empty stomach. I say, landlord, beer, if you please, and swiftly." A lass with an impressive thick plait reaching her hips brought them mugs and bowls of soup. Geralt, observing her round, downy face, thought that she would have a pretty mouth if she remembered to keep it closed. "Forest Dryad," Dandelion cried, seizing the girl's arm and kissing her on her open palm. "Sylph, fairy, oh, divine creature, with eyes like azure lakes. Thou art as exquisite as the morn, and the shape of thy parted lips are enticingly—" "Give him some beer, quick," Dainty groaned, "or it'll end in disaster." "No, it won't. No, it won't," the bard assured him. "Right, Geralt? You'd be hard-pressed to find more composed men than we two. I, dear sir, am a poet and a musician, and music soothes the savage breast, and the Witcher here present is menacing only to monsters. I present Geralt of Rivia, the terror of striggers, werewolves, and sundry vileness. You've surely heard of Geralt, Dainty?" "Yes, I have," the halfling said, glowering suspiciously at the Witcher. What brings you to Novigrad, sir? Have some dreadful monsters been sighted here? Have you been commissioned?" "No," smiled the Witcher. "I'm here for my own amusement."
"Oh,"
Dainty said, nervously wriggling his hirsute feet, which were dangling half a cubit above the floor.
"that's good."
"What's good?" Dandelion asked, swallowing a spoonful of soup and sipping some beer. "Do you plan to support us, Beavervelt? In our amusements, I mean. Excellent. We intend to get tipsy here in the Spearblade, and then we plan to repair to the Passiflora, a very dear and high-class den of iniquity, where we may treat ourselves to a half-blood she-elf, and who knows, maybe even a pure-blood she-elf. Nonetheless, we need a sponsor."
"What do you mean? Someone to pay the bills?"
"As I thought," Dainty muttered.
"I'm sorry. Firstly, I've arranged several business meetings. Secondly, I don't have the funds to sponsor such diversions. Thirdly, they only admit humans to the Passiflora."
"What are we, then? Short-eared owls? Oh, I understand. They don't admit halflings. That's true. You're right, Dainty. This is Novigrad, the capital of the world."
"Right, then,"
the halfling said, still looking at the Witcher and twisting his mouth strangely.
"I'll be off. I'm due to be—"
The door to the chamber opened with a bang, and in rushed Dainty Beavervelt. "Oh, ye gods!" Dandelion yelled. The halfling standing in the doorway in no way differed from the halfling sitting at the table, if one were to disregard the fact that the one at the table was clean and the one in the doorway was dirty, dishevelled, and haggard.
Got you, you bitch's tail!
The dirty halfling roared, lunging at the table.
You thief!
His clean twin leapt to his feet, overturning his stool and knocking the dishes from the table. Geralt reacted instinctively and very quickly. Seizing his scabbard sword from the table, he lashed Biebervelt on the nape of his neck with a heavy belt. The halfling tumbled onto the floor, rolled over, dived between Dandelion's legs, and scrambled towards the door on all fours, his arms and legs suddenly lengthening like a spider's. Seeing this, the dirty Dainty Biebervelt swore, howled, and jumped out of the way, slamming his back into the wooden wall. Geralt threw aside the scabbard and kicked the stool out of the way, darting after him. The clean Dainty Biebervelt, now utterly dissimilar apart from the colour of his waistcoat, cleared the threshold like a grasshopper and hurtled into the common bar, colliding with the lass with a half-open mouth. Seeing his long limbs and melted, grotesque physiognomy, the lass opened her mouth to its full extent and uttered an ear-splitting scream. Geralt, taking advantage of the loss of momentum caused by the collision, caught up with the creature in the centre of the chamber and knocked it to the ground with a deft kick behind the knee. "Don't move a muscle, chum," he hissed through clenched teeth, holding the point of his sword to the oddity's throat. "Don't budge." "What's going on here?" the innkeeper yelled, running over, clutching a spade handle. "What's all this about? Guard! Detchka, run and get the guard."
No,
the creature wailed, flattening itself against the floor and deforming itself even more.
have mercy, no. Don't call them,
The dirty halfling echoed, rushing out of the snug.
Grab that girl, Dandelion.
The troubadour caught the screaming Detchka, carefully choosing the places to seize her by. Detchka squealed and crouched on the floor by his legs.
Calm down, innkeeper, Dainty Beavervelt panted. It's a private matter. We won't call out the guard. I'll pay for any damage.
There isn't any damage, the innkeeper said level-headedly, looking around.
But there will be,
the plump halfling said, gnashing his teeth.
Because I'm going to thrash him, and properly. I'm going to thrash him cruelly, at length, and frenziedly, and then everything here will be broken.
The long-limbed and spread-out caricature of Dainty Beavervelt, flattened on the floor, snivelled pathetically. "Nothing doing," the innkeeper said coldly, squinting and raising the spade handle a little. "Thrash it in the street or in the yard, sir, not here, and I'm calling the guard. Needs must, it is my duty. Forsooth, it's some kind of monster." "Innkeeper, sir," Geralt said calmly, not relieving the pressure on the freak's neck. "Keep your head. No one is going to destroy anything. There won't be any damage. The situation is under control. I'm a witcher, and, as you can see, I have the monster in my grasp. And because, indeed, it does look like a private matter, we'll calmly sort it out here in the snug. Release the girl, Dandelion, and come here. I have a silver chain in my bag. Take it out and tie the arms of this gentleman securely around the elbows behind its back. Don't move, chum." The creature whimpered softly.
Very well, Geralt, Dandelion said. I've tied it up. Let's go to the snug. And you, landlord, what are you standing there for? I ordered beer, and when I order beer, you ought to keep serving me until I shout water.
Geralt pushed the tied-up creature towards the snug and roughly sat him down by the post. Dainty Beavervelt also sat down and looked at him in disgust.
"It's monstrous the way it looks," he said. "Just like a pile of fermenting dough. Look at its nose, Dandelion. It'll fall off any second, God blimey. And its ears are like my mother-in-law's just before a funeral. Ugh!"
Hold hard, Dandelion muttered. "Are you Beavervelt?"
Yes, you are, without doubt.
But whatever's sitting by that post was you a moment ago, if I'm not mistaken. Geralt? Everybody's watching you. You're a witcher. What the bloody hell is going on here? What is it?" "It's a mimic."
"You're a mimic yourself,"
the creature said in a guttural voice, swinging its nose.
"I'm not a mimic. I'm a Doppler, and my name is Teleco Lungravinkletorta, Penstock for short. My close friends call me Doo-Doo." "I'll give you Doo-Doo, you whoreson," Dainty yelled, aiming a punch at him. "Where are my horses, you thief?"
Gentlemen, the innkeeper cautioned them, entering with a jug and a handful of beer mugs. You promised things will be peaceful.
Ah, beer, the halfling sighed. Oh, but I'm damned thirsty and hungry.
I could do with a drink too,
Teleko Lungravink Letort declared gurglingly. He was totally ignored. What is it? The innkeeper asked, contemplating the creature, who at the sight of the beer stuck its long tongue out beyond sagging, doughy lips. What is it, gentlemen? A mimic, the Witcher repeated, heedless of the faces the monster was making. It actually has many names. A changeling, shapeshifter, vexling, or fetch, or a doppler, as it called itself. A vexling? The innkeeper yelled. Here, in Novigrad, in my inn. Swiftly, we must call the guard, and the priests, or it'll be on my head.
Easy does it,
Dainty Beavervelt rasped, hurriedly finishing off dandelion soup from a bowl which by some miracle had not been spilled.
There'll be time to call anyone we need, but later. This scoundrel robbed me, and I have no intention of handing it over to the local law before recovering my property. I know you, Novigradians, and your judges. I might get a tenth, nothing more.
Have mercy,
The Doppler whimpered plaintively.
don't hand me over to humans. Do you know what they do to the likes of me?
Naturally we do, the innkeeper nodded. The priests perform exorcisms on any vexling they catch. Then they tie it up with a stick between its knees and cover it thickly with clay, mixed with iron filings, roll it into a ball and bake it in a fire until the clay hardens into brick. At least that's what used to be done years ago, when these monsters occurred more often.
A barbaric custom. Human, indeed,
Dainty said, grimacing, and pushing the now empty bowl away.
But perhaps it is a just penalty for banditry and thievery. Well, talk, you good-for-nothing. Where are my horses? Quickly, before I stretch that nose of yours between your legs and shove it up your backside. Where are my horses? I said.
I've sold them,
Teleko Lungravik Letort stammered, and his sagging ears suddenly curled up into balls resembling tiny cauliflowers.
Sold them? Did you hear that?
The halfling cried, frothing at the mouth.
It sold my horses.
Of course, Dandelion said. It's had time to. It's been here for 3 days. For the last 3 days, you've...
it's... Damn it, Dainty. Does that mean... Of course, that's what it means, the merchant yelled, stamping his hairy feet. It robbed me on the road, a day's ride from the city. It came here as me, get it? And sold my horses. I'll kill it. I'll strangle it with my bare hands.
Tell us how it happened, Mr. Beavervelt.
Geralt of Rivia, if I'm not mistaken. The Witcher?
Geralt nodded in reply.
That's a stroke of luck, the halfling said. I'm Dainty Beavervelt of Knotgrass Meadow, farmer, stock breeder, and merchant. Call me Dainty, Geralt.
Say on, Dainty.
Very well. It was like this. Me and my ostlers were driving my horses to be sold at the market in Devil's Ford. We had our last stop a day's ride from the city. We overnighted, having first dealt with a small cask of burnt caramel vodka. I woke up in the middle of the night feeling like my bladder was about to burst, got off the wagon, and I thought to myself, I'll take a look at what the nags are doing in the meadow. I walk out, fog thick as buggery, I look, and suddenly someone's coming. Who goes there? I ask. He says nothing. I walk up closer and see myself, like in a looking-glass. I think I oughtn't to have drunk that bloody moonshine, accursed spirit. And this one here, for that's what it was, ups and conks me on a noggin. I saw stars and went arse over tit. The next day, I woke up in a bloody thicket with a lump like a cucumber on my head, and not a soul in sight, not a sign of our camp either. I wandered the whole day before I finally found the trail. 2 days I trudged, eating roots and raw mushrooms, and in the meantime that lousy Dulico or whatever it was has ridden to Novigrad as me and flogged my horses. I'll get the bloody... and I'll thrash my ostlers. I'll give each one 100 lashes on his bare arse, the cretins. Not to recognise their own governor, to let themselves be outwitted like that. Numbskulls, imbeciles, sots.
Don't be too hard on them, Dainty, Geralt said. They didn't have a chance. A mimic copies so exactly there's no way of distinguishing it from the original. I mean, from its chosen victim. Have you never heard of mimics?
Some? I thought it was all fiction.
Well, it isn't. All a Doppler has to do is observe its victim closely in order to quickly and unerringly adapt to the necessary material structure. I would point out that it's not an illusion, but a complete, precise transformation to the minutest detail. How a mimic does it, no one knows. Sorcerers suspect the same component of the blood is at work here as with lycanthropy, but I think it's either something totally different or 1,000-fold more powerful. After all, a werewolf has only 2, at most 3 different forms, while a Doppler can transform into anything it wants to, as long as the body mass more or less tallies.
Body mass?
Well, it won't turn into a mastodon or a mouse.
Oh, I understand. And the chain you've bound him up in, what's that about?
It's silver. It's lethal to a lycanthrope, but as you see, for a mimic, it merely stops the transmutations. That's why it's sitting here in its own form. The Doppler pursed its glutinous lips and glowered at the Witcher with an evil expression in its dull eyes, which had already lost the hazel colour of the halfling's irises and were now yellow.
I'm glad it's sitting, cheeky bastard, Dainty snarled. Just to think it even stopped here, at the blade, where I customarily lodge. It already thinks it's me.
Dandelion nodded.
Dainty, he said, it was you. I've been meeting it here for 3 days now. It looked like you and spoke like you, and when it came to standing around, it was as tight as you, possibly even tighter. That last point doesn't worry me, the halfling said, because perhaps I'll recover some of my money. It disgusts me to touch it. Take the purse of it, Dandelion, and check what's inside. There ought to be plenty, if that horse thief really did sell my nags.
How many horses did you have, Dainty?
12.
Calculating according to world prices, the troubadour said, looking into the purse, what's here would just about buy a single horse if you chanced upon an old foundered one. Calculated according to Novigradian prices, there's enough for 2 goats, 3 at most. The merchant said nothing, but looked as though he were about to cry. Tellico Lungravinculatorte hung his nose down low and his lower lip even lower, after which he began to softly gurgle.
In a word, the halfling finally sighed, I've been robbed and ruined by a creature whose existence I previously didn't believe in. That's what you call bad luck.
That about sums it up, the Witcher said, casting a glance at the Doppler huddled on the stool. I was also convinced that mimics had been wiped out long ago. In the past, so I've heard, plenty of them used to live in the nearby forests and on the plateau, but their ability to mimic seriously worried the first settlers, and they began to hunt them, quite effectively. Almost all of them were quickly exterminated.
And lucky for us, the innkeeper said, spitting onto the floor. I swear on the eternal fire, I prefer a dragon or a demon, which is always a dragon or a demon. You know where you are with them. But werewolfery, all those transmutations and metamorphoses, that hideous demonic practice, trickery, and the treacherous deceit conjured up by those hideous creatures will be the detriment and undoing of people. I tell you, let's call the guard and into the fire with this repugnance.
Geralt, Dandelion asked curiously, I'd be glad to hear an expert's opinion. Are these mimics really so dangerous and aggressive?
Their ability to mimic, the Witcher said, is an attribute which serves as defence rather than aggression. I haven't heard of—
A pox on it,
Dainty interrupted angrily, slamming his fist down on the table.
If thumping a fellow in the head and plundering him isn't aggression, I don't know what is. Stop being clever. The matter is simple. I was waylaid and robbed, not just of my hard-earned property, but also of my own form. I demand compensation, and I shall not rest—
The guard. We must call the guard, the innkeeper said. And we should summon the priests and burn that monster, that non-human.
Give over, landlord, the halfling said, raising his head. You're becoming a bore, that guard of yours. I would like to point out that that non-human hasn't harmed anybody else, only me. And incidentally, I'm also a non-human.
Oh, don't be ridiculous, Mr. Beaverfelt. The innkeeper laughed nervously. What are you and what is that? You're not far off being a man, and that's a monster. It astonishes me that you're sitting there so calmly, Witcher, sir. What's your trade, if you'll pardon me? It's your job to kill monsters, isn't it?
Monsters, Geralt said coldly, but not the members of intelligent races.
Come, sir, the innkeeper said. That's a bit of an exaggeration.
Indeed, Dandelion cut in. You've overstepped the mark, Geralt, with that intelligent race. Just take a look at it.
Tellico Lungravinculatorta, indeed, did not resemble a member of an intelligent race at that moment. He resembled a puppet made of mud and flour, looking at the Witcher with a beseeching look in its dull yellow eyes. Neither were the snuffling sounds being emitted from its nose, which now reached the table, consistent with a member of an intelligent race.
Enough of this empty bullshit, Dainty Bibblewelt suddenly roared. There's nothing to argue about. The only thing that counts is my horses and my loss. Do you hear, you bloody slippery jack, you? Who did you sell my nags to? What did you do with the money? Tell me now before I kick you black and blue and flay you alive.
Detchka, opening the door slightly, stuck her flaxen-haired head into the chamber.
We have visitors, Father, she whispered. Journeyman masons from the scaffolding and others. I'm serving them, but don't shout so loudly in here, because they're beginning to look funny at the snog.
By the eternal fire,
the innkeeper said in horror, looking at the molten Doppler.
If someone looks in and sees it.
Oh, it'll look bad. If we aren't to call the guard, then... Witcher, sir? If it really is a vexling, tell it to change into something decent, as a disguise, like. Just for now.
That's right, Dainty said. Have him change into something, Geralt.
Into whom?
The Doppler suddenly gurgled.
I can only take on a form I've had a good look at. Which of you shall I turn into?
Not me, the innkeeper said hurriedly. Nor me, Dandelion snorted. Anyway, it wouldn't be any disguise. Everybody knows me, so the sight of two dandelions at one table would cause a bigger sensation than the one here in person. It will be the same with me, Geralt smiled. That leaves you, Dainty. And it's turned out well. Don't be offended, but you know yourself that people have difficulty distinguishing one halfling from another. The merchant did not ponder this for long.
Very well, he said. Let it be. Take the chain off him, Witcher. Right then. Turn yourself into me, oh intelligent race.
After the chain had been removed, the Doppler rubbed its doughy hands together, felt its nose, and stared goggle-eyed at the halfling. The sagging skin on its face tightened up and acquired colour. Its nose shrank and drew in with a dull, squelching sound, and curly hair sprouted on its bald pate. Now it was Dainty's turn to goggle. The innkeeper opened his mouth in mute astonishment, and Dandelion heaved a sigh and groaned. The last thing to change was the colour of its eyes. The second Dainty Bibblewelt cleared its throat, reached across the table, seized the first Dainty Bibblewelt's beer mug, and greedily pressed its mouth to it.
It can't be. It can't be, Dandelion said softly. Just look. He's been copied exactly. They're indistinguishable, down to the last detail. This time even the mosquito bites and stains on its breeches. Yes, on its breeches. Geralt, not even sorcerers can manage that. Feel it, it's real wool. Well, that's no illusion. Extraordinary. How does it do it?
No one knows, the Witcher muttered. It doesn't either. I said it has the complete ability for the free transformation of material structure, but it is an organic, instinctive ability.
But the breeches! What has it made the breeches out of? And the waistcoat?
That's its own adapted skin. I don't think it'd be happy to give up those trousers. Anyway, they'd immediately lose the properties of wool.
Pity, Dainty said, showing cunning, because I was just wondering whether to make it change a bucket of matter into a bucket of gold.
The Doppler, now a faithful copy of the halfling, lounged comfortably and grinned broadly, clearly glad to be the centre of interest. It was sitting in an identical pose to Dainty, swinging its hairy feet the same way.
You know plenty about Dopplers, Geralt, it said, then took a swig from the mug, smacked its lips, and belched. Plenty indeed. Ye gods! Its voice and mannerisms are also Bibblewelt's, Dandelion said. Haven't any of you got a bit of red silk thread? We ought to mark it, damn it, because there might be trouble. Come on, Dandelion, the first Dainty Bibblewelt said indignantly. Surely you won't mistake it for me. The differences are clear at first glance. The second Dainty Bibblewelt completed the sentence and belched again gracefully. Indeed, in order to be mistaken, you'd have to be more stupid than a mare's arse. Didn't I say? Dandelion whispered in amazement. It thinks and talks like Bibblewelt. They're indistinguishable. An exaggeration, the halfling said, pouting. A gross exaggeration.
No, Geralt rebutted. It's not an exaggeration. Believe it or not, but at this moment, it is you, Dainty. In some unknown way, the Doppler also precisely copies its victim's mentality.
Mental what?
The mind's properties, the character, feelings, thoughts, the soul, which would confirm what most sorcerers and old priests would deny, that the soul is also matter.
Blasphemy!
The innkeeper gasped.
And poppycock, Dainty Beavervelt said firmly. Don't tell stories, Witcher. The mind's properties are like that. Copying someone's nose and breeches is one thing, but someone's mind is no bloody mean feat. I'll prove it to you now. If that lousy Doppler had copied my merchant's mind, he wouldn't have sold the horses in Novigrad, where there's no market for them. He would have ridden to the horse fair in Devil's Ford, where they're sold to the highest bidder. You don't lose money there. Well, actually, you do.
The Doppler imitated the halfling's offended expression and snorted characteristically.
First of all, the prices at the auction in Devil's Ford are coming down because the merchants are fixing the bidding. And, in addition, you have to pay the auctioneer's commission. Don't teach me how to trade, you prat, Beavervelt said indignantly. I would have taken 90 or 100 apiece in Devil's Ford, and how much did you get off those Novigradian chances? 130, the Doppler replied. You're lying, you rascal. I am not. I drove the horses straight to the port, sir, and found a foreign fur trader. Furriers don't use oxen when they assemble their caravans because oxen are too slow. Furs are light but costly, so one needs to travel swiftly. There's no market for horses in Novigrad, so neither are there any horses. I had the only available ones, so I could name my price. Simple. Don't teach me, I said, Dainty yelled, flushing red. Very well, you made a killing, so where's the money? I reinvested it, Tellico said proudly, imitating the halfling's typical raking of his fingers through his thick mop of hair. Money, Mr. Dainty, has to circulate, and business has to be kept moving. Be careful I don't wring your neck. Tell me what you did with the cash you made on the horses. I told you. I sank it into goods. What goods? What did you buy, you freak? Cochineal, the Doppler stuttered, and then enumerated quickly. 1,000 bushels of cochineal, 6,200 weight of mimosa bark, 55 gallons of rose oil, 23 barrels of cod liver oil, 600 earthenware bowls, and 80 pounds of beeswax. I bought the cod liver oil very cheaply, incidentally, because it was a little rancid. Oh, yes, I almost forgot. I also bought 100 cubits of cotton string.
A long, very long silence fell.
Cod liver oil?
Dainty finally said, enunciating each word very slowly.
Cotton string? Rose oil. I must be dreaming. Yes, it's a nightmare. You can buy anything in Novigrad, every precious and everyday thing, and this moron here spends my money on shit, pretending to be me. I'm finished. My money's lost. My merchant's reputation is lost. No, I've had enough of this. Lend me your sword, Geralt. I'll cut him to shreds here and now.
The door to the chamber creaked open.
The merchant, Beavervelt?
Crowed an individual in a purple toga, which hung on his emaciated frame as though on a stick. He had a hat on his head, shaped like an upturned chamber pot.
Is the merchant Beavervelt here?
Yes,
the two halflings answered in unison. The next moment, one of the dainty Beavervelts flung the contents of the mug in the witch's face, deftly kicked the stool from under Dandelion, and slipped under the table towards the door, knocking over the individual in the ridiculous hat on the way.
Fire! Help!
It yelled, rushing out towards the common chamber.
Murder! Calamity!
Geralt, shaking off the beer froth, rushed after him, but the second Beavervelt, who was also tearing towards the door, slipped on the sawdust and fell in front of him. The two of them fell over right on the threshold. Dandelion, clambering out from under the table, cursed hideously.
Assault!
Yelled the skinny individual entangled in his purple toga from the floor.
Robbery! Criminals!
Geralt rolled over the halfling and rushed into the main chamber to see the Doppler, jostling the drinkers, running out into the street. He rushed after him, only to run into a resilient but hard wall of men barring his way. He managed to knock one of them over, smeared with clay and stinking of beer, but others held him fast in the iron grip of powerful hands. He fought furiously, but heard the dry report of snapping thread and rending leather, and the sleeve become loose under his right armpit. The Witcher swore and stopped struggling. We have him, the masons yelled. We've got the robber. What do we do now, master? Lime, the master bellowed, raising his head from the table and looking around with unseeing eyes.
"Guard!" the purple one yelled, crawling from the chamber on all fours. "An official has been assaulted. Guard! It will be the gallows for you, villain."
We have him, the masons shouted. We have him, sir.
"That's not him," the individual in the toga bellowed. "Catch the scoundrel! After him!"
Who?
"Biebervelt the halfling! After him! Give chase to the dungeons with him!"
Hold on a moment, Dainty said, emerging from the snug. What's it all about, Mr. Schwann? Don't drag my name through the mud, and don't sound the alarm. There's no need.
Schwann were silent and looked at the halfling in astonishment. Dandelion emerged from the chamber, bonnet at an angle, examining his loot. The masons, whispering among themselves, finally released Geralt. The Witcher, although absolutely furious, limited himself to spitting copiously on the floor.
"Merchant Biebervelt,"
Schwann crowed, narrowing his myopic eyes.
"What is the meaning of this? An assault on a municipal official may cost you dearly. Who was that halfling who bolted?"
My cousin, Dainty said quickly. A distant cousin.
Yes, Dandelion agreed, swiftly backing him up and feeling in his element. Biebervelt's distant cousin, known as Nutcase Biebervelt, the black sheep of the family. When he was a child, he fell into a well, a dried-up well, but unfortunately the pail hit him directly on his head. He's usually peaceful. It's just that the colour purple infuriates him. But there's nothing to worry about, because he's calmed by the sight of red hairs on a lady's loins. That's why he rushed straight to Passiflora. I tell you, Mr. Schwann.
That's enough, Dandelion, the Witcher hissed. Shut up, damn it.
Schwann pulled his toga down, brushed the sawdust off it, and straightened up, assuming a haughty air.
"Now then," he said, "heed your relatives more attentively, Merchant Biebervelt, because, as you well know, you are responsible. Were I to lodge a complaint... But I cannot afford the time. I am here, Biebervelt, on official business. On behalf of the municipal authorities, I summon you to pay tax."
Hey?
"Tax!"
the official repeated, and pouted his lips in a grimace probably copied from someone much more important.
"What are you doing? Been infected by your cousin? If you make a profit, you have to pay taxes, or you'll have to do time in the dungeon."
Me?
Dainty roared.
Me? Make a profit? All I have is losses, for fuck's sake.
Careful, Biebervelt,
the Witcher hissed, while Dandelion kicked the halfling furtively in his hairy shin. The halfling coughed.
Of course,
he said, struggling to put a smile on his chubby face.
Of course, Mr. Schwann. If you make a profit, you have to pay taxes. High profits, high taxes. And the other way round, I'd say.
"It is not for me to judge your business, sir,"
the official said, making a sour face. He sat down at the table, removing from the fathomless depths of his toga an abacus and a scroll of parchment, which he unrolled on the table, first wiping it with a sleeve.
"It is my job to count up and collect. Now then, let us reckon this up. That will be 2 down, carry the 1. Now then, 1,553 crowns and 20 pennies.
A hushed wheeze escaped Dainty Biebervelt's lips. The masons muttered in astonishment. The innkeeper dropped a bowl. Dandelion gasped.
Very well. Goodbye, lads, the halfling said bitterly. If anybody asks, I'm in the dungeon.
Chapter 2.
By tomorrow at noon, Dainty groaned. And that Horson, that Schwann, damn him, the repulsive creep, could have extended it. Over 1,500 crowns! How am I to come by that kind of coin by tomorrow? I'm finished, ruined. I'll rot in the dungeons. Oh, don't let's sit here, damn it. Let's catch that bastard Doppler, I tell you. We have to catch it.
The three of them were sitting on the marble sill of a disused fountain, occupying the centre of a small square among sumptuous but extremely tasteless merchants' townhouses. The water in the fountain was green and dreadfully dirty,
and the golden ides, swimming among the refuse, worked their gills hard and gulped in air from the surface through open mouths. Dandelion and the halfling were chewing some fritters which the troubadour had swiped from a stall they had just passed. "In your shoes," the bard said, "I'd forget about catching it and start looking around for somebody to borrow the money off. What will you get from catching the Doppler? Perhaps you think Schwann will accept it as an equivalent?" "You're a fool, Dandelion. When I catch the Doppler, I'll get my money back." "What money? Everything he had in that purse went on covering the damage and a bribe for Schwann. It didn't have any more." "Dandelion," the halfling grimaced, "you may know something about poetry, but in business matters, forgive me, you're a total blockhead. Did you hear how much tax Schwann is charging me? And what do you pay tax on, eh? On what?" "On everything," the poet stated. "I even pay tax on singing, and they don't give a monkey's about my explanations that I was only singing from an inner need." "You're a fool," I said. "In business, you pay taxes on profits. On profits, Dandelion. Do you comprehend? That rascal of a Doppler impersonated me and made some business transactions, fraudulent ones, no doubt, and made money on them. It made a profit. And I'll have to pay tax and probably cover the debts of that scoundrel, if it has run up any debts. And if I don't pay it off, I'm going to the dungeons. They'll brand me with a red-hot iron in public and send me to the mines. Oh, pox on it." "Huh," Dandelion said cheerfully. "So, you don't have a choice, Dainty. You'll have to flee the city in secret. Know what? I have an idea. We'll wrap you up in a sheepskin. You can pass through the gate, calling, 'I'm a little bar lamb, bar, bar, bar.' No one will recognize you." "Dandelion," the halfling said glumly, "shut up, or I'll kick you. Geralt." "What, Dainty?" "Will you help me to catch the Doppler?" "Listen," the Witcher said, still trying in vain to sew up his torn jacket sleeve. "This is Novigrad, a population of 30,000 humans, dwarves, half-elves, halflings and gnomes, and probably as many out-of-towners again. How do you mean to find someone in this rabbit warren?" Dainty swallowed a fritter and licked his fingers. "And magic, Geralt? Those Witcher spells of yours about which so many tales circulate?" "A Doppler is only magically detectable in its own form, and doesn't walk down the street in it. And even if it did, magic would be no use, because there are plenty of weak sorcerer signals all around. Every second house has a magical lock on the door, and 3/4 of the people wear amulets of all kinds, against thieves, fleas, and poisoning. Too many to count." Dandelion ran his fingers over the lute's fingerboard and strummed the strings. "Spring will return with warm rain perfumed," he sang. "No, that's no good. Spring will return, the sun... Oh, no, damn it. It's just not coming. Not at all." "Stop squawking," the halfling snapped. "You're getting on my nerves." Dandelion threw the ides the rest of his fritter and spat into the fountain. "Look," he said, "golden fish. It's said that they grant wishes." "Those ones are red," Dainty observed. "Never mind, it's a trifle. Damn it, there are 3 of us, and they grant 3 wishes. That works out at 1 each, what? Dainty? Wouldn't you wish for the fish to pay the tax for you?" "Of course. And apart from that, for something to fall from the sky and whack the Doppler on the noggin. And also, stop! We also have our wishes. I'd like the fish to supply me with an ending for my ballad. And you, Geralt?" "Get off my back, Dandelion." "Don't spoil the game, Witcher. Tell us what you'd wish for." The Witcher got up. "I would wish," he murmured, "that the fact we're being surrounded would turn out to be a misunderstanding." From an alleyway opposite the fountain emerged 4 individuals dressed in black, wearing round leather caps, heading slowly towards them. Dainty swore softly and looked around. Another 4 men came out of a street behind their backs. They did not come any closer, and, having positioned themselves, stood blocking the street. They were holding strange-looking discs resembling coiled ropes. The Witcher looked around and moved his shoulders, adjusting the sword slung across his back. Dandelion groaned. From behind the backs of the individuals in black emerged a small man in a white caftan and a short grey cape. The gold chain on his neck sparkled to the rhythm of his steps, flashing yellow. "Chapelle," Dandelion groaned. "It's Chapelle."
The individuals in black behind them moved slowly towards the fountain. The Witcher reached for his sword.
"No, Geralt," Dandelion whispered, moving closer to him. "For God's sake, don't draw your weapon. It's the temple guard. If we resist, we won't leave Novigrad alive. Don't touch your sword."
The man in the white caftan walked swiftly towards them. The individuals in black followed him, surrounding the fountain at a march, and occupied strategic, carefully chosen positions. Geralt observed them vigilantly, crouching slightly. The strange discs they were holding were not, as he had first thought, ordinary whips. They were lamiers. The man in the white caftan approached them.
"Geralt," the bard whispered, "by all the gods, keep calm."
"I won't let them touch me," the Witcher muttered. "I won't let them touch me, whoever they are. Be careful, Dandelion. When it starts, you two flee as fast as you can. I'll keep them busy for some time." Dandelion did not answer. Slinging the lute over one shoulder, he bowed low before the man in the white caftan, which was ornately embroidered with gold and silver threads in an intricate mosaic pattern. "Venerable Chapelle." The man addressed as Chapelle stopped and swept them with his gaze. His eyes, Geralt noticed, were frost-cold and the colour of steel. His forehead was pale, beaded unhealthily with sweat, and his cheeks were flushed with irregular red blotches. "Mr. Dainty Bieberveld, merchant," he said. "The talented Dandelion and Geralt of Rivia, a representative of the oh-so-rare witcher's profession. A reunion of old friends here in Novigrad?" None of them answered. "I consider it highly regrettable," Chapelle continued, "that a report has been submitted about you." Dandelion blanched slightly, and the halfling's teeth chattered. The Witcher was not looking at Chapelle. He did not take his eyes off the weapons of the men in leather caps surrounding the fountain. In most of the countries known to Geralt, the production and possession of spiked lamiers, also called Mahenian scourges, were strictly prohibited. Novigrad was no exception. Geralt had seen people struck in the face by a lamier. He would never forget those faces. "The keeper of the Spear-Blade Inn," Chapelle continued, "had the audacity to accuse you gentlemen of collusion with a demon, a monster known as a changeling or a vexling." None of them answered. Chapelle folded his arms on his chest and looked at them coldly. "I felt obliged to forewarn you of that report. I shall also inform you that the above-mentioned innkeeper has been imprisoned in the dungeons. There is a suspicion that he was raving under the influence of beer or vodka. Astonishing what people will concoct. Firstly, there are no such things as vexlings. It is a fabrication of superstitious peasants." No one commented on this. "Secondly, what vexling would dare to approach a witcher?" Chapelle smiled. "And not be killed at once. Am I right? The innkeeper's accusation would thus be ludicrous, were it not for one vital detail." Chapelle nodded, pausing dramatically. The Witcher heard Dainty slowly exhaling a large lungful of air. "Yes, a certain vital detail," Chapelle repeated. "Namely, we are facing heresy and sacrilegious blasphemy here, for it is a well-known fact that no vexling, absolutely no vexling, nor any other monster could even approach the walls of Novigrad, because here, in 19 temples, burns the eternal fire, whose sacred power protects the city. Whoever says that he saw a vexling at the spear-blade, a stone's throw from the chief altar of the eternal fire, is a blasphemous heretic, and will have to retract his claim. Should he not want to, he shall be assisted by the power and means which, trust me, I keep close at hand in the dungeons. Thus, as you can see, there is nothing to be concerned about." The expressions on the faces of Dandelion and the halfling showed emphatically that they both thought differently. "There is absolutely nothing to be concerned about," Chapelle repeated. "You may leave Novigrad without let or hindrance. I will not detain you. I do have to insist, gentlemen, however, that you do not broadcast the lamentable fabrications of the innkeeper, that you do not discuss this incident openly. Statements calling into question the divine power of the eternal fire, irrespective of the intention, we, the humble servants of the temple, would have to treat as heresy with all due consequences. Your personal religious convictions, whatever they might be, and however I respect them, are of no significance. Believe in what you will. I am tolerant while somebody venerates the eternal fire and does not blaspheme against it. But should they blaspheme, I shall order them burnt at the stake, and that is that. Everybody in Novigrad is equal before the law, and the law applies equally to everybody. Anyone who blasphemes against the eternal fire perishes at the stake, and their property is confiscated. But enough of that. I repeat, you may pass through the gates of Novigrad without hindrance. Ideally. Chapelle smiled slightly, sucked in his cheeks in a cunning grimace, and his eyes swept the square. The few passers-by, observing the incident, quickened their step and rapidly turned their heads away. Ideally, Chapelle finished, ideally with immediate effect. Forthwith. Obviously, with regard to the Honourable Merchant Bieberfeld, that forthwith means forthwith, having settled all fiscal affairs. Thank you for the time you have given me. Dainty turned away, mouth moving noiselessly. The Witcher had no doubt that the noiseless word had been whoreson. Dandelion lowered his head, smiling foolishly. My dear Witcher, Chapelle suddenly said, a word in private, if you would. Geralt approached, and Chapelle gently extended an arm. If he touches my elbow, I'll strike him, the Witcher thought. I'll strike him whatever happens. Chapelle did not touch Geralt's elbow. My dear Witcher, he said quietly, turning his back on the others, I am aware that some cities, unlike Novigrad, are deprived of the divine protection of the eternal fire. Let us then suppose that a creature similar to a Vexling was prowling in one of those cities. I wonder how much you would charge in that case for undertaking to catch a Vexling alive. I don't hire myself out to hunt monsters in crowded cities. The Witcher shrugged. An innocent bystander might suffer harm. Are you so concerned about the fate of innocent bystanders? Yes, I am, because I am usually held responsible for their fate and have to cope with the consequences. I understand. And would not your concern for the fate of innocent bystanders be in inverse proportion to the fee? It would not. I do not greatly like your tone, Witcher. But no matter. I understand what you hint at by it. You are hinting that you do not want to do what I would ask you to do, making the size of the fee meaningless. And the form of the fee? I do not understand. Come. I mean it. Purely theoretically, Chapelle said, quietly, calmly, without any anger or menace in his voice. It might be possible that the fee for your services would be a guarantee that you and your friends would leave the theoretical city alive. What then? It is impossible, the Witcher said, smiling hideously, to answer that question theoretically. The situation you are discussing, Reverend Chapelle, would have to be dealt with in practice. I am in no hurry to do so, but if the necessity arises, if there proves to be no other choice, I am prepared to go through with it. Perhaps you are right, Chapelle answered dispassionately. Too much theory. As concerns practice, I see that there will be no collaboration. A good thing, perhaps? In any case, I cherish the hope that it will not be a cause for conflict between us. I also cherish that hope. Then may that hope burn in us, Geralt of Rivia. Do you know what the eternal fire is? A flame that never goes out, a symbol of permanence, a way leading through the gloom, a harbinger of progress, of a better tomorrow. The eternal fire, Geralt, is hope. For everybody without exception. For if something exists that embraces us all, you, me, others, then that something is precisely hope. Remember that. It was a pleasure to meet you, Witcher." Geralt bowed stiffly, saying nothing. Chappelle looked at him for a moment, then turned about energetically and marched through the small square without looking around at his escort. The men, armed with lamias, fell in behind him, forming up into a well-ordered column. "Oh, mother of mine," Dandelion whimpered timidly, watching the departing men. "But we were lucky. If that is the end of it, if they don't collar us right away—" "Calm down," the Witcher said, "and stop whining. Nothing happened after all." "Do you know who that was, Geralt?" "No." "That was Chappelle, Minister for Security Affairs. The Novigrad Secret Service is subordinate to the temple. Chappelle is not a priest, but the eminence Grease to the hierarch, the most powerful and most dangerous man in the city. Everybody, even the council and the guilds, shaking their shoes before him because he's a first-rate bastard, Geralt, drunk on power, like a spider drunk on fly's blood. It's common knowledge, though not discussed openly in the city, what he's capable of. People vanishing without trace, falsified accusations, torture, assassinations, terror, blackmail, and plain plunder. Extortion, swindles, and fraud. By the gods, you've landed us in a pretty mess, Bieberfeld." "Give it a rest, Dandelion," Dainty snapped. "It's not that you have to be afraid of anything. No one ever touches a troubadour. For unfathomable reasons, you are inviolable." "In Novigrad," Dandelion whined, still pale, "an inviolable poet may still fall beneath a speeding wagon, be fatally poisoned by a fish, or accidentally drown in a moat. Chappelle specializes in mishaps of that nature. I consider the fact that he talked to us at all something exceptional. One thing is certain, he didn't do it without a reason. He's up to something. You'll see. They'll soon embroil us in something, clap us in irons, and drag us off to be tortured with the sanction of the law. That's how things are done here." "There is quite some truth," the halfling said to Geralt, "in what he says. We must watch out. It's astonishing that scoundrel Chappelle hasn't keeled over yet. For years they've been saying he's sick, that his heart will give out, and everybody's waiting for him to croak." "Be quiet, Bieberfeld," the troubadour hissed apprehensively, looking around, "because somebody's bound to be listening. Look how everybody's staring at us. Let's get out of here, I'm telling you, and I suggest we treat seriously what Chappelle told us about the Doppler. I, for example, have never seen a Doppler in my life, and if it comes to it, I'll swear as much before the eternal fire." "Look," the halfling suddenly said. "Somebody is running towards us. Let's flee," Dandelion howled. Calm yourself, Dainty grinned, and combed his mop of hair with his fingers. "I know him. It's Muskrat, a local merchant, the guild's treasurer. We've done business together. Hey, look at the expression on his face, as though he's shat his breeches. Hey, Muskrat, are you looking for me?" "I swear by the eternal fire," Muskrat panted, pushing back a fox fur cap and wiping his forehead with his sleeve. "I was certain they'd drag you off to the Barbican. It's truly a miracle. I'm astonished." "It's nice of you," the halfling sneeringly interrupted, "to be astonished. You'll delight us even more if you tell us why." "Don't play dumb, Bieberveld," Muskrat frowned. "The whole city already knows the profit you made on the cochineal. Everybody's talking about it already, and it has clearly reached the hierarch and Chappelle. How cunning you are, how craftily you benefited from what happened in Porvis." "What are you blathering about, Muskrat?" "Ye gods, would you stop trying to play the innocent, Dainty? Did you buy that cochineal? For a song at 10.40 a bushel? Yes, you did, taking advantage of the meagre demand you paid with a backed bill without paying out a penny of cash. And what happened? In the course of a day, you palmed off the entire cargo at 4 times the price for cash on the table. Perhaps you'll have the cheek to say it was an accident, a stroke of luck, that when buying the cochineal you knew nothing about the coup in Porvis." "The what? What are you talking about?" "There was a coup in Porvis," Muskrat yelled, "and one of those, Leverutions. King Reed was overthrown, and now the Thyacinid clan is in power. Reed's court, the nobility and the army, wore blue, and the weaving mills there only bought indigo. But the colour of the Thyacinids is scarlet, so the price of indigo went down, and cochineal's gone up. And then it came out that you, Bieberveld, had the only available cargo in your grasp. Ah!" Dainty fell silent and looked distressed. "Crafty, Beaverveld, must be said," Muskrat continued. "And you didn't tell anybody anything, not even your friends. If you'd let on, we might both have made a profit, might even have set up a joint factory, but you preferred to act alone, softly, softly. Your choice, but don't count on me any longer either. On the eternal fire, it's true that every halfling is a selfish bastard and a whoreson. Vimy Vivaldi never gives me a backed bill, and you, on the spot, because you're one tribe, you damned inhumans, you poxy halflings and dwarves, damn the lot of you." Muskrat spat, turned on his heel, and walked off. Dainty, lost in thought, scratched his head until his mop of hair crunched. "Something's dawning on me, boys," he said at last. "Now I know what needs to be done. Let's go to the bank. If anyone can make head or tail of all this, that someone is the banker friend of mine, Vimy Vivaldi." Chapter 3. "I imagined the bank differently," Dandelion whispered, looking around the room. "Where do they keep the money, Geralt?" "The devil only knows," the Witcher answered quietly, hiding his torn jacket sleeve. "In the cellars, perhaps." "Not a chance. I've had a look around. There aren't any cellars here." "They must keep it in the loft, then." "Would you come to my office, gentlemen?" Vimy Vivaldi asked. Young men and dwarves of indiscernible age, sitting at long tables, were busy covering sheets of parchment with columns of figures and letters. All of them, without exception, were hunched over, with the tips of their tongues sticking out. The work, the Witcher judged, was fiendishly monotonous, but seemed to preoccupy the staff utterly. In the corner, on a low stool, sat an elderly, beggarly-looking man, busy sharpening quills. He was making hard work of it. The banker carefully closed the door to the office, stroked his long, white, well-groomed beard, spotted here and there with ink, and straightened a claret-coloured velvet jerkin stretched over a prominent belly. "You know, Dandelion, sir," he said, sitting down at an enormous mahogany table piled with parchments, "I imagined you quite differently, and I know your songs. I know them. I've heard them. About Princess Vanda, who drowned in the river Duppy because no one wanted her, and about the kingfisher that fell into a privy." "They aren't mine." Dandelion flushed in fury. "I've never written anything like that." "Ah, I'm sorry then." "Perhaps we could get to the point," Dainty cut in. "Time is short, and you're talking nonsense. I'm in grave difficulties, Vimy." "I was afraid of that," the dwarf nodded. "As you recall, I warned you, Beaverveld. I told you 3 days ago not to sink any resources into that rancid cod liver oil. What if it was cheap? It is not the nominal price that is important, but the size of the profit on resale. The same applies to the rose oil and the wax and those earthenware bowls. What possessed you, Dainty, to buy that shit, and in hard cash to boot, rather than judiciously pay with a letter of credit or by draft? I told you that storage costs in Novigrad are devilishly high. In the course of 2 weeks, they will surpass the value of those goods threefold. But you—"
"Yes," the halfling quietly groaned. "Tell me, Vivaldi, what did I do?"
"But you told me not to worry, that you would sell everything in the course of 24 hours, and now you come and declare that you are in trouble, smiling foolishly and disarmingly all the while. But it's not selling, is it? And costs are rising, what? Ah, that's not good, not good. How am I to get you out of it, Dainty? Had you at least insured that junk, I would have sent some of the clerks at once to quietly torch the store. No, my dear, the only thing to be done is to approach the matter philosophically and say to oneself, fuck this for a game of soldiers. This is business. You win some, you lose some. What kind of profit was it anyway, that cod liver oil, wax and rose oil? Risible. Let us talk about serious business. Tell me if I should sell the mimosa bark yet, because the offers have begun to stabilize at 5 5/6. Hey? Are you deaf? The banker frowned. The last offer was exactly 5 5/6. You came back, I hope, to close the deal. You won't get 7 anyhow, Dainty.
"I came back."
Vivaldi stroked his beard and picked some crumbs of fruitcake from it. "You were here an hour since," he said calmly, "with instructions to hold out for 7. A 7-fold increase on the price you paid is 2 crowns 5 and 40 pennies a pound. That is too high, Dainty, even for such a perfectly timed market." The tanneries will already have reached agreement, and they will solidly stick to the price, I'm absolutely certain.
The door to the office opened, and something in a green felt cap and a coat of dappled conifer girded with hempen twine rushed in.
Merchant Sulamir is offering 2 crowns 15,
it squealed.
6 1/6, Vivaldi swiftly calculated. What do we do, Dainty?
Sell, the halfling yelled. A 6-fold profit, and you're still bloody wondering?
Another something in a yellow cap and a mantle resembling an old sack dashed into the office. Like the first something, it was about 2 cubits tall.
Merchant Beaverfell instructs now to sell for below 7,
it shouted, wiped its nose on its sleeve and ran out.
Aha, the dwarf said after a long silence. One Beaverveld orders us to sell, and another Beaverveld orders us to wait. An interesting situation. What do we do, Dainty? Do you set about explaining at once, or do we wait until a third Beaverveld orders us to load the bark onto galleys and ship it to the land of the cynocephali, eh?
What is that? Dandelion stammered, pointing at the something in a green cap still standing in the doorway. What the bloody hell is it?
A young gnome, Geralt said. Undoubtedly, Vivaldi confirmed coldly. It is not an old troll. Anyway, it's not important what it is. Very well, Dainty, if you please.
Vimy, the halfling said, if you don't mind, don't ask questions. Something awful has happened. Just accept that I, Dainty Beaverveld of Knockgrass Meadow, an honest merchant, do not have a clue what's happening. Tell me everything in detail, the events of the last 3 days. Please, Vimy?
Curious, the dwarf said. Well, for the commission I take, I have to grant the wishes of the client, whatever they might be. So, listen. You came rushing in here 3 days ago, out of breath, gave me a deposit of 1,000 crowns, and demanded an endorsement on a bill amounting to 2,520 to the bearer. I gave you that endorsement.
Without a guarantee?
Correct. I like you, Dainty.
Go on, Vimy.
The next day, you rushed in with a bang and a clatter, demanding that I issue a letter of credit on a bank in Vitsima for the considerable sum of 3,500 crowns. The beneficiary was to be, if I remember rightly, a certain Therlukokian, alias Truffle. Well, I issued that letter of credit.
Without a guarantee, the halfling said hopefully.
My affection for you, Beaverveld, the banker said, ceases at around 3,000 crowns. This time I took from you a written obligation that in the event of insolvency, the mill would be mine.
What mill?
That of your father-in-law, Arno Hardbottom in Knockgrass Meadow.
I'm not going home, Dainty declared glumly, but determinedly. I'll sign on to a ship and become a pirate.
Vimy Vivaldi scratched an ear and looked at him suspiciously.
Oh, come on, he said. You took that obligation and tore it up almost right away. You're solvent. No small wonder with profits like that.
Profits?
That's right. I forgot, muttered the dwarf. I was meant not to be surprised by anything. You made a good profit on the cochineal, Beaverveld, because, you see, there was a coup in Porvis.
I already know, the halfling interrupted. Indigo's gone down and cochineal's gone up, and I made a profit. Is that true, Vimy?
Yes, it is. You have in my safekeeping 6,346 crowns and 80 pennies, net, after deducting my commission and tax.
You paid the tax for me?
What else would I do? Vivaldi said in astonishment. After all, you were here an hour ago and told me to pay it. The clerk has already delivered the entire sum to City Hall. Something around 1,500, because the sale of the horses was, of course, included in it.
The door opened with a bang, and something in a very dirty cap came running in.
2 crowns 30,
it shouted.
Merchant Hazelquist. Don't sell, Dainty called. We'll wait for a better price. Begone. Back to the market with the both of you.
The 2 gnomes caught some coppers thrown to them by the dwarf and disappeared.
Right. Where was I?
Vivaldi wondered, playing with a huge, strangely formed amethyst crystal serving as a paperweight.
Aha! With the cochineal, bought with the bill of exchange. And you needed the letter of credit I mentioned to purchase a large cargo of mimosa bark. You bought a deal of it, but quite cheaply, for 35 pennies a pound, from a Zangviberian factor, that Truffle, or perhaps Morel. The galley sailed into port yesterday, and then it all began.
I can imagine, Dainty groaned.
What is mimosa bark needed for? Dandelion blurted out.
Nothing, the halfling muttered dismally. Unfortunately.
Mimosa bark, poet sir, the dwarf explained, is an agent used for tanning hides.
If somebody was so stupid, Dainty interrupted, as to buy mimosa bark from beyond the seas, when oak bark can be bought into Maria for next to nothing.
And here is the nub of the matter, Vivaldi said. Because in Temeria the Druids have just announced that if the destruction of oaks is not stopped immediately, they will afflict the land with a plague of hornets and rats. The Druids are being supported by the Dryads, and the king there is fond of Dryads. In short, since yesterday there has been a total embargo on Temerian oak, for which reason mimosa is going up. Your information was accurate, Dainty. A stamping was heard from the chambers beyond the room, and then the something in a green cap came running into the office out of breath.
The Honourable Merchant Sulamere, the note panted, has instructed me to repeat that Merchant Biebervelt, the halfling, is a reckless bristly swine, a profiteer and charlatan, and that he, Sulamere, hopes that Biebervelt gets the mange. He'll give 2 crowns 44, and that is his last word.
Sell! The halfling blurted out. Go on, Shorty, run off and accept it. Count it up for me.
Vivaldi reached beneath some scrolls of parchment and took out a dwarven abacus, a veritable marvel. Unlike abacuses used by humans, the dwarven one was shaped like a small open-work pyramid. Vivaldi's abacus, though, was made of gold wires over which slid angular beads of ruby, emerald, onyx, and black agate, which fitted into each other. The dwarf slid the gemstones upwards, downwards, and sideways for some time, with quick, deft movements of his plump finger. That will be minus the costs and my commission, minus tax. Yes, 15,622 crowns and 25 pennies. Not bad.
If I've reckoned correctly, Dainty Biebervelt said slowly, altogether net, then I ought to have in my account
precisely 21,969 crowns and 5 pennies. Not bad.
Not bad,
Dandelion roared.
Not bad? You could buy a large village or a small castle for that. I've never ever seen that much money at one time.
I haven't either, the halfling said.
But simmer down, Dandelion. It so happens that no one has seen that money yet, and it isn't certain if anyone ever will.
Hey, Biebervelt, the dwarf snorted. Why such gloomy thoughts? Sulamere will pay in cash or by a bill of exchange, and Sulamere's bills are reliable. What then is the matter? Are you afraid of losing on that stinking cod liver oil and wax? With profits like that, you'll cover the losses with ease.
That's not the point.
So, what is the point?
Dainty coughed and lowered his curly mop.
Vinny,
he said, eyes fixed on the floor.
Chapelle is snooping around me.
The banker clicked his tongue.
Very bad, he drawled. But it was to be expected. You see, Biebervelt, the information you use when carrying out the transactions does not just have commercial significance, but also political. No one knew what was happening in Porvis and Temeria, Chapelle included, and Chapelle likes to be the first to know. So, now, as you can imagine, he is racking his brains about how you knew. And I think he has guessed, because I think I've also worked it out.
That's fascinating.
Vivaldi swept his eyes over Dandelion and Geralt and wrinkled his snub nose.
Fascinating? I'll tell you what's fascinating. Your party, Dainty, he said. A troubadour, a witcher, and a merchant. Congratulations. Master Dandelion shows up here and there, even at royal courts, and no doubt keeps his ears open. And the witcher, a bodyguard, someone to frighten debtors. Hasty conclusions, Mr. Vivaldi, Geralt said coldly. We are not partners.
And I, Dandelion said, flushing, do not eavesdrop anywhere. I'm a poet, not a spy.
People say all sorts of things, the dwarf grimaced. All sorts of things, Master Dandelion.
Lies, the troubadour yelled. Damned lies.
Very well, I believe you. I believe you. I just don't know if Chapelle will believe it. But who knows? Perhaps it will all blow over. I tell you, Biebervelt, that Chapelle has changed a lot since his last attack of apoplexy. Perhaps the fear of death looked him in the arse and forced him to think things over. I swear he is not the same Chapelle. He seems to have become courteous, rational, composed, and
And somehow honest. Get away, the halfling said. Chapelle, honest, courteous? Impossible. I'm telling you how it is, Vivaldi replied. And how it is what I'm telling you. What is more, now the temple is facing another problem, namely the eternal fire. What do you mean? The eternal fire, as it's known, is supposed to burn everywhere. Altars dedicated to that fire are going to be built everywhere, all over the city. A huge number of altars. Don't ask me for details, Dainty. I'm not very familiar with human superstitions. But I know that all the priests in Chapelle also are concerned about almost nothing else but those altars and that fire. Great preparations are being made. Taxes will be going up, that is certain. Yes, Dainty said. Cold comfort, but...
The door to the office opened again, and the Witcher recognised the something in a green cap and coney fur coat.
Merchant Biebervelt, it announced. Instructs to buy more pots should they run out. Price no object.
Excellent.
The halfling smiled, and his smile called to mind the twisted face of a furious wildcat.
We will buy huge quantities of pots. Mr. Biebervelt's wish is our command. What else shall we buy more of? Cabbage? Wood tar? Iron rakes? Furthermore, the something in the fur coat croaked, Merchant Biebervelt requests 30 crowns in cash because he has to pay a bribe, eat something and drink some beer, and 3 miscreants stole his purse in the spear blade. Oh, 3 miscreants, Dainty said in a slow, drawling voice. Yes, this city seems to be full of miscreants, and where, if one may ask, is the Honourable Merchant Biebervelt at this very moment? Where else would he be? The something said, sniffing. Than at the Western Market. Vimy, Dainty said malevolently, don't ask questions, but find me a stout, robust stick from somewhere. I'm going to the Western Market, but I can't go without a stick. There are too many miscreants and thieves there. A stick, you say? Of course. But, Dainty, I'd like to know something because it is preying on me. I was supposed not to ask any questions, but I shall make a guess, and you can either confirm or deny it. All right. Guess away. That rancid cod liver oil, that wax, and those balls, that bloody twine. It was all a tactical gambit, wasn't it? You wanted to distract the competition's attention from the cochineal and the mimosa, didn't you? To stir up confusion on the market. Eh, Dainty? The door opened suddenly, and something without a cap ran in. Sorrel reports that everything is ready, it yelled shrilly, and asks if he should start pouring. Yes, he should, the halfling bellowed, at once. By the red beard of old Rundurin, Vimy Vivaldi bellowed as soon as the gnome had shut the door. I don't understand anything. What is happening here? Pour what? Into what? I have no idea, Dainty admitted. But, Vimy, the wheels of business must be oiled.
Chapter 4. Pushing through the crowd with difficulty, Geralt emerged right in front of a stall laden with copper skillets, pots and frying pans, sparkling in the rays of the twilight sun. Behind the stall stood a red-bearded dwarf in an olive-green hood and heavy sealskin boots. The dwarf's face bore an expression of visible dislike. To be precise, he looked as though any moment he intended to spit on the female customer sifting through the goods. The customer's breast was heaving. She was shaking her golden curls and was besetting the dwarf with a ceaseless and chaotic flow of words. The customer was none other than Vespula, known to Geralt as the thrower of missiles. Without waiting for her to recognize him, he melted swiftly back into the crowd. The Western Market was bustling with life, and getting through the crowd was like forcing one's way through a hawthorn bush. Every now and then something caught on his sleeves and trouser legs. At times it was children who had lost their mothers while they were dragging their fathers away from the beer tent. At others it was spies from the guardhouse. At others, shady vendors of caps of invisibility, aphrodisiacs and bawdy scenes carved in cedarwood. Geralt stopped smiling and began to swear, making judicious use of his elbows. He heard the sound of a lute and a familiar peal of laughter. The sounds drifted from a fabulously coloured stall decorated with the sign, "Buy your wonders, amulets and fish bait here." "Has anyone ever told you, madam, that you are gorgeous?" Dandelion yelled, sitting on the stall and waving his legs cheerfully. "No, it cannot be possible. This is a city of blind men, nothing but a city of blind men. Come, good folk, who would hear a ballad of love? Whoever would be moved and enriched spiritually, let him toss a coin into the hat. What are you shoving your way in for, you bastard? Keep your pennies for beggars, and don't insult an artist like me with copper. Perhaps I could forgive you, but art never could." "Dandelion," Geralt said, approaching. "I thought we'd split up to search for the Doppler, and you're giving concerts. Aren't you ashamed to sing at markets like an old beggar?" "Ashamed?" the bard said, astonished. "What matters is what and how one sings, not where. Besides, I'm hungry, and the stallholder promised me lunch. As far as the Doppler is concerned, look for it yourselves. I'm not cut out for chases, brawls, or mob law. I'm a poet." "You would do better not to attract attention, old poet. Your fiancé is here. There could be trouble." "Fiancé?" Dandelion blinked nervously. "Which one do you mean? I have several." Vespula, clutching a copper frying pan, had forced her way through the audience with the momentum of a charging aurochs. Dandelion jumped up from the stall and darted away nimbly, leaping over some baskets of carrots. Vespula turned towards the Witcher, dilating her nostrils. Geralt stepped backwards, his back coming up against the hard resistance of the stall's wall. "Geralt!" Dainty Beavervelt shouted, jumping from the crowd and bumping into Vespula. "Quickly, quickly! I've seen him! Look, there! He's getting away!" "I'll get you, you lechers!" Vespula screamed, trying to regain her balance. "I'll catch up with the whole of your debauched gang. A fine company. A pheasant, a scruff, and a midget with hairy heels. You'll be sorry." "This way, Geralt!" Dainty yelled as he ran, jostling a small group of schoolboys intently playing the shell game. "There! There! He's scarpered between those wagons. Steal up on him from the left. Quick!" They rushed off in pursuit, the curses of the stallholders and customers they had knocked over ringing in their ears. By a miracle, Geralt avoided tripping over a snot-nosed tot caught up in his legs. He jumped over it, but knocked over 2 barrels of herrings, for which an enraged fisherman lashed him across the back with a live eel, which he was showing to some customers at that moment. They saw the Doppler trying to flee past a sheep pen. "From the other side!" Dainty yelled. "Cut him off from the other side, Geralt!" The Doppler shot like an arrow along the fence, green waistcoat flashing. It was becoming clear why he was not changing into anybody else. No one could rival a halfling's agility. No one, apart from another halfling. Or a witcher. Geralt saw the Doppler suddenly changing direction, kicking up a cloud of dust and nimbly ducking into a hole in the fence surrounding a large tent serving as a slaughterhouse and a shambles. Dainty also saw it. The Doppler jumped between the palings and began to force his way between the flock of bleating sheep crowded into the enclosure. It was clear he would not make it. Geralt turned and rushed after him between the palings. He felt a sudden tug, heard the crack of leather tearing, and the leather suddenly became very loose under his other arm. The Witcher stopped, swore, spat, and swore again. Dainty rushed into the tent after the Doppler. From inside came screaming, the noise of blows, cursing, and an awful banging noise. The Witcher swore a third time, extremely obscenely, then gnashed his teeth, raised his hand, and formed his fingers into the Ard sign, aiming it straight at the tent. The tent billowed up like a sail during a gale, and from the inside reverberated a hellish howling, clattering, and lowing of oxen. The tent collapsed. The Doppler, crawling on its belly, darted out from beneath the canvas and dashed towards another, smaller tent, probably the cold store. Right away, Geralt pointed his hand towards him and jabbed him in the back with the sign. The Doppler tumbled to the ground as though struck by lightning, turned a somersault, but immediately sprang up and rushed into the tent. The Witcher was hot on his heels. It stank of meat inside the tent, and it was dark. Tellico Lungrevinkle Torte was standing there, breathing heavily, clinging with both hands onto a side of pork hanging on a pole. There was no other way out of the tent, the canvas firmly fastened to the ground with numerous pegs. "It's a pleasure to meet you again, Mimic," Geralt said coldly. The Doppler was breathing heavily and hoarsely. "Leave me alone," it finally grunted. "Why are you tormenting me, Witcher?" "Tellico," Geralt said, "you're asking foolish questions. In order to come into possession of Biebervelt's horses and identity, you cut his head open and abandoned him in the wilds. You're still making use of his personality and ignoring the problems you're causing him. The devil only knows what else you're planning, but I shall confuse those plans in any event. I don't want to kill you or turn you over to the authorities, but you must leave the city. I'll see to it that you do.
And if I don't want to?
I'll carry you out in a sack on a handcart.
The Doppler swelled up abruptly, and then suddenly became thinner and began to grow, his curly chestnut hair turning white and straightening, reaching his shoulders. The halfling's green waistcoat shone like oil, becoming black leather, and silver studs sparkled on the shoulders and sleeves. The chubby, ruddy face elongated and paled. The hilt of a sword extended above its right shoulder.
Don't come any closer, the second Witcher said huskily, and smiled. Don't come any nearer, Geralt. I won't let you lay hands on me.
What a hideous smile I have, Geralt thought, reaching for his sword. What a hideous face I have, and how hideously I squint. So, is that what I look like? Damn. The hands of the Doppler and the Witcher simultaneously touched their sword hilts, and both swords simultaneously sprang from their scabbards. Both Witchers simultaneously took 2 quick, soft steps, one to the front, the other to the side. Both of them simultaneously raised their swords and swung them in a short, hissing moulinet. Simultaneously, they both stopped dead, frozen in position.
You cannot defeat me, the Doppler snarled, because I am you, Geralt. You are mistaken, Teleco, the Witcher said softly. Drop your sword and resume Biebervelt's form. Otherwise you'll regret it, I warn you. I am you, the Doppler repeated. You will not gain an advantage over me. You cannot defeat me, because I am you. You cannot have any idea what it means to be me, Mimic.
Teleco lowered the hand gripping the sword.
I am you, he repeated. No, the Witcher countered. You are not. And do you know why? Because you're a poor, little, good-natured Doppler. A Doppler who, after all, could have killed Biebervelt and buried his body in the undergrowth, by so doing gaining total safety and utter certainty that he would not be unmasked, ever, by anybody, including the halfling's spouse, the famous Gardenia Biebervelt. But you didn't kill him, Teleco, because you didn't have the courage, because you're a poor, little, good-natured Doppler, whose close friends call him Doodoo, and whoever you might change into, you'll always be the same. You only know how to copy what is good in us, because you don't understand the bad in us. That's what you are, Doppler.
Teleco moved backwards, pressing his back against the tense canvas.
Which is why, Geralt continued, you will now turn back into Biebervelt and hold your hands out nicely to be tied up. You aren't capable of defying me, because I am what you are unable of copying. You're absolutely aware of this, Doodoo, because you took over my thoughts for a moment.
Teleco straightened up abruptly. His face's features, still those of the Witcher, blurred and spread out, and his white hair curled and began to darken.
You're right, Geralt, he said indistinctly, because his lips had begun to change shape. I took over your thoughts only briefly, but it was sufficient. Do you know what I'm going to do now?
The leather Witcher jacket took on a glossy cornflower blue colour. The Doppler smiled, straightened his plum bonnet with its egret's feather, and tightened the strap of the lute slung over his shoulder, the lute which had been a sword a moment ago.
I'll tell you what I'm going to do, Witcher, he said with the rippling laughter characteristic of Dandelion. I'll go on my way, squeeze my way into the crowd, and change quietly into any old body, even a beggar, because I prefer being a beggar in Novigrad to being a Doppler in the wilds. Novigrad owes me something, Geralt. The building of a city here tainted a land we could have lived in our natural form. We have been exterminated, hunted down like rabid dogs. I'm one of the few to survive. I want to survive, and I will survive. Long ago, when wolves pursued me in the winter, I turned into a wolf and ran with the pack for several weeks, and survived. Now I'll do that again, because I don't want to roam about through wildernesses and be forced to winter beneath fallen trees. I don't want to be forever hungry. I don't want to serve as target practice all the time. Here in Novigrad it's warm. There's grub. I can make money, and very seldom do people shoot arrows at each other. Novigrad is a pack of wolves. I'll join that pack and survive. Understand?
Geralt nodded reluctantly.
You gave dwarves, halflings, gnomes, and even elves, the Doppler continued, twisting his mouth in an insolent dandelion smile, the modest possibility of assimilation. Why should I be any worse off? Why am I denied that right? What do I have to do to be able to live in this city? Turn into a she-elf with doe eyes, silky hair, and long legs? Well, in what way is a she-elf better than me? Only that at the sight of the she-elf you pick up speed, and at the sight of me you want to puke. You know where you can stuff an argument like that. I'll survive anyway. I know how to. As a wolf, I ran, I howled, and I fought without others over a she-wolf. As a resident of Novigrad, I'll trade, weave wicker baskets, beg or steal. As one of you, I'll do what one of you usually does. Who knows? Perhaps I'll even take a wife. The Witcher said nothing. Yes, as I said, Tellico continued calmly, I'm going, and you, Geralt, will not even try to stop me, because I, Geralt, knew your thoughts for a moment, including the ones you don't want to admit to, the ones you even hide from yourself, because to stop me, you'd have to kill me, and the thought of killing me in cold blood fills you with disgust, doesn't it? The Witcher said nothing. Tellico adjusted the strap of the lute again, turned away, and walked towards the exit. He walked confidently, but Geralt saw him hunch his neck and shoulders in expectation of the whistle of a sword blade. He put his sword in its scabbard. The Doppler stopped in mid-step and looked around. Farewell, Geralt, he said. Thank you.
Farewell, Dudu, the Witcher replied. Good luck.
The Doppler turned away and headed towards the crowded bazaar with Dandelion's sprightly, cheerful, swinging gait. Like Dandelion, he swung his left arm vigorously, and just like Dandelion, he grinned at the wenches as he passed them. Geralt set off slowly after him. Slowly. Tellico seized his lute in full stride. After slowing his pace, he played 2 chords, and then dexterously played a tune Geralt knew. Turning away slightly, he sang, exactly like Dandelion.
Spring will return, on the road the rain will fall, hearts will be warmed by the heat of the sun. It must be thus, for fire still smoulders in us all, an eternal fire, hope for each one.
Pass that on to Dandelion, if you remember, he called, and tell him that winter is a lousy title. The ballad should be called The Eternal Fire. Farewell, Witcher. Hey! Suddenly resounded. You pheasant! Tellico turned around in astonishment. From behind a stall emerged Vespula, her breast heaving violently, raking him up with a foreboding gaze. Eyeing up tarts, you cad, she hissed, breast heaving more and more enticingly. Singing your little songs, are you knave? Tellico took off his bonnet and bowed, broadly smiling Dandelion's characteristic smile. Vespula, my dear, he said ingratiatingly, how glad I am to see you. Forgive me, my sweet, I owe you— Oh, you do, Vespula interrupted loudly. And what you owe me, you will now pay me. Take that. An enormous copper frying pan flashed in the sun, and with a deep, loud clang, smacked into the Doppler's head. Tellico staggered and fell with an indescribably stupid expression frozen on his face, arms spread out, and his physiognomy suddenly began to change, melt, and lose its similarity to anything at all. Seeing it, the Witcher leapt towards him, in full flight, snatching a large killim from a stall. Having unfurled the killim on the ground, he sent the Doppler onto it with 2 kicks, and rolled it up in it quickly but tightly. Sitting down on the bundle, he wiped his forehead with a sleeve. Vespula, gripping the frying pan, looked at him malevolently, and the crowd closed in all around. He's sick, the Witcher said, and smiled affectedly. It's for his own good. Don't crowd, good people. The poor thing needs air. Did you hear? Chapelle asked, calmly but resonantly, suddenly pushing his way through the throng. Please, do not form a public gathering here. Please disperse. Public gatherings are forbidden, punishable by a fine. In the blink of an eye, the crowd scattered to the sides, only to reveal Dandelion approaching swiftly to the sounds of his lute. On seeing him, Vespula
let out an ear-splitting scream, dropped the frying pan, and fled across the square.
What happened? Dandelion asked. Did she see the devil?
Geralt stood up, holding the bundle, which had begun to move weakly. Chapelle slowly approached. He was alone, and his personal guard was nowhere to be seen.
I wouldn't come any closer, Geralt said quietly. If I were you, Lord Chapelle said, I wouldn't come any closer.
You wouldn't? Chapelle tightened his thin lips, looking at him coldly.
If I were you, Lord Chapelle, I would pretend I never saw anything.
Yes, no doubt, Chapelle said. But you